Okay.
Yeah.
Because you know what gold nuggets are going to come out.
Hold on, I almost pushed leave meeting instead of got it. Okay. So I've had this experience twice now. The second time was with you on our last call. It's kind of like a mind fuck, like this trippy feeling. It really is. I remember, I've got a little, I don't really watch the news, but I've got some sources of information that I feel like I can trust,
Yeah.
And so we went back to the States, and I was sitting at an Asian restaurant, and I think it was CNN, or I don't know what they had on, something. Oh, sheesh. Am I clear?
When the video freezes, the audio sort of keeps going. So yes,
Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay, you're caught up to your words now too. Okay. So CNN was playing, and exactly the words that I've been hearing, almost identical, were being played on CNN, but at 180 degree flipped. So in other words, it's the same stories, but the perpetrators were the other guy and we're the good guy. And my version of the story that I had been hearing was the exact 180 degrees.
Yeah.
And I had that similar experience in our conversation, which it's not exactly, but just this feeling. It wasn't like 180 degree and there wasn't a victim perpetrator, but it was like a feeling like, whoa, George and I are looking at this from two different perspectives, but we're the same. Like you said something about left versus right,
Yeah.
And I feel so aligned with you guys on so many things. And yet I think the lens through which we view it is part of what's creating the divide. So I don't really know how else to explain that, but like it is the lens that we're viewing it through, but it's being created artificially. And then we're, we internalize it as if that's the way that it is. And it was pretty trippy. And then after we got off our call, I forgot what it was. Let me see. I put some questions in the Google Doc. Did you see? Do you want to say something before we go to the next thing?
Thank you for asking. That like really hit me, that there's this, it's like this thread of a topic, let's say, just like, I don't know what else to call it, but a topic. There's this thread, and on either side and all around the thread are positions about that topic.
Yes.
And that the thread is whatever if there is even such a thing as the objective truth, the thread is the objective truth, and all of the positions around the thread just aren't the truth. Right. Neither my position nor your position is the truth, but the thread, people are suffering.
Yes.
Is the thread. There is an energy afoot that has us believe we're separate. That's yes. A thread. There's children who are not being cared for, animals who are not being protected. That's a thread. And all the positions around that thread, like you said, are perception and story and victim and victor and villain, and none of those are the truth.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know. It's like we spend so much time fabricating around from the position.
Yes. Well,
like,
I had this.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I want you to finish. You were on a track.
Well, I had this realization. I don't know if I've shared it with you, or maybe we've had some of this conversation, but it came up again after our call.
Uh-huh.
And especially I went and looked at the ACLU website.
What did you call that,
And
the document? I just want to make sure.
oh, I just called it JPK and AW calls.
There you are. Cool.
I'm not even going back to the document yet, but just this, what I see on ACLW and what so I don't know, you don't know this, maybe, I don't know if we've talked about this, but when the George Floyd thing happened, I had a real reaction to it.
Oh my God.
And
I do too.
I think I shared a little bit of that with you on that little catch-up call that we had. But what I came to after many, many months, and I was in a couple different groups with some, I attended 3 different things and read some books about racial stuff. And what I came to now, and I came to it a long time ago, was that the ultimate truth is we're all the same. And so to keep perpetuating that these people are victims on some level, it's kind of like you guys changing your thing from Voices for the Voiceless to Voices for Love. There's a consciousness that's perpetrated. This feels like part of what we're talking about. It's just coming strong for me to talk about it.
Okay.
Of victimhood and inequality. And I think part of my work is to bridge the storyline and the structures that have created that experience, including our own consciousness, mostly our own consciousness, to bridge that with the absolute truth. Like maybe the new systems and structure are based on the absolute truth, right? They should be, that no one is in fact less than, no one is, I went on to Southwest website and I was like pissed off a little bit because they said something about the Asian, what was the Asian thing called? There's a 4-letter acronym for the Asian and Pacific Islanders that were being hate of Asians and Pacific Islanders when that Asian hate came out. And it was about violent, like Southwest standing against violence toward Asians and island Pacific people. And I'm like, what about violence toward all people? Because that's what's being perpetrated right now. That's the consciousness. No, I understand, because I know about because I did this with the Black stuff. I understand the all lives matter and the Black. I'm just saying, the consciousness that holds that in place is continuing to be perpetuated. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're nailing it. We're so on. It's a yes and, right? It's like because if we say all lives matter, we sound cold and insensitive, right? Because we kind of are, like, but it's also true. Like the reasoning behind Black Lives Matter is because Black lives are under attack. That's what we need to stop. That's true. And all lives matter. That's also true. And so it's both consciousnesses need to be like, the reasoning I think you're tapped into it. Like if you're walking down the street and a house is on fire, that house is on fire. That house needs water. All houses need water. Yes, of course. But that house is the one that's on fire right now. So there's a consciousness around, we have to attend to this urgency. And it's also true that we have to adjust our consciousness around all living beings, all life, animals, dolphins, sea turtles, children.
My point is we're all living inside the same system, which is broken. And
because it perpetuates that.
Yes. And we are also being treated like, if we look at the elites versus the people, if we want to call it that, if there's a war right now going on, it's that maybe, but we're in all the same. You know, there's a Dr. Zelenko. I don't know if you know who that is. He's the doctor that's treated a lot of heads of states for COVID, and he's done it with ivermectin and other alternative treatments. And he said, he is a Jewish man, you know, I don't know if that's an Orthodox Jew that wears the thing. And he's saying, we're all the Jews now. This is really humanity standing together against a tyrannical thing. And so what I'm saying is, this unity that I'm calling for, that I'm wanting to bring forth, is like, I don't even want it to be a war.
Right.
What are we standing for? Equality, yes, but not continuing to hold the consciousness of separation and calling for equality while we're still believing that,
Yeah.
like, it's kind of like putting ice cream on top of poop. I can't. That was Debbie Ford saying, I don't know if I have words for it, but this is what I feel like is
I get
up.
it. It's
You
so
know,
true. That's what's
standing
like,
together for something, for freedom, for truth, for, yes. Sorry,
what
go
it
ahead.
is, what I believe at the crux of it is this, and you've heard me say this before. There's the lie of separation. And the
Yes.
more we buy into the lie of separation, the more we behave as though the lie of separation is true, the more this stuff is even possible. If we reject the lie of separation, it is impossible to harm one another.
Yes.
If we know that harming
Yes.
you
Ooh,
harms
I got
me,
chills.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. If I know in every cell of my body that harming you harms me, harming your child harms my child, harming your dog harms my dog, I get chills too. Then it's impossible to harm one another.
Yes.
And somewhere along the line, now the Old Testament Christians will say it happened in the Garden of Eden. We bought into the separation the moment Adam, but they that's even, it seems to me, off base, because they teach we actually separated from God at that moment. You bite into the apple and you separated humans from God. Boy, that to me is the beginning of the whole like,
Yeah, that's it. I think that's the Bible being written for use of power and manipulation. I think the story of Adam and Eve, to me, feels like that's the day the humans decided that we're going to create our own reality, and we're going to use judgment, and, you know, we're limiting God every time we make up a story about something that's not true. That's like that's separating ourselves or separating others, or that's based in lack and fear. That's creating an alternative reality to the Garden of Eden.
yeah,
By our perception that we are separate, we are we get to decide. Yeah. I think, though, there's something here, George, that it would be so helpful for me if we could talk about for just a second more. Let's just go back to the Black Lives Matter, or the racism thing,
yeah,
and anything that and this is what I think there's. I don't know if I can come back to the conviction that I had when that was all going on, but I just picture all these societies that are against cancer and against this and against, and for equality and for and like the NCAAP can't exist if there's not racism and anti-cancer treatments, which we could talk about that all day, because I know
all
people
day.
personally who have found cures for cancer that they were fired from their job and locked out of their buildings, and the lies that our government has told to keep us from the truth. But my point is just, in order for so many of these things to exist, we have to believe in the thing that we're fighting against, like the
Exists.
consciousness. Yes, we
Yeah.
have to keep perpetuating separation so that we can try to fix the separation. And there isn't any fucking separation for real. Like, I understand people perceive it. So So that's what, like, I'm like, okay, the 3D and 5D, matrix, the two different, yeah, there is separation, but it's in our consciousness. It's not actually real. Yes, there is inequality, but it's in our consciousness. This whole thing is a giant reflection of our consciousness. So how do we, I don't know if this is too big of a thing.
Oh, but it's the thing,
It
Allison.
is the thing.
It's the
It's the
thing.
thing.
This idea of when I was sick, somehow I knew that it wasn't about being against the cancer. It wasn't even about being for me as against the cancer. It was about creating an environment hospitable to well-being. As long as even if we're saying for, the for implies an against.
It does. Thank you for saying that. That's so brilliant what you just said. It wasn't for me against the cancer. Like, that's what we do, right? We make it make sense in our mind by saying I'm for this, but it's really still an against. And I love, so you're creating and I read your book, but thank you for bringing this environment hospitable to well-being.
So if we make our purpose, a human being's purpose, to create an environment hospitable to well-being on the planet,
Yes.
creating an environment hospitable for the well-being of all little children, for the well-being of all animals, all beings, all life. If you look at since civilization began to gather non-tribally. You look at all the tribal Aboriginal cultures around the planet, there's always been a symbiosis between the tribal culture and the planet. We work the earth takes care of us. We protect the water nourishes us, whatever. There's somewhere along the line, I'm not an anthropologist, but I'd be curious to know at what point humans began to gather at such a scale that we left the tribal connection to the earth. You could say, well, when we started gathering in cities in Athens and Sparta, maybe then, maybe before then in China, maybe, who knows, where we stopped, we shifted or tried to shift our relationship with the planet. Ever since then, it could be argued that we have been creating an environment inhospitable to life on Earth.
Yes. One of the best books I've read about this, and I'm not even finished with it. I started it a while back and it's sitting on my shelf, but it is fantastic, is Radical Wholeness by Philip Shepherd. And he does have, oh, it's so good, George. You would love it. Like, I know you would love it. He goes into the history, the entomology of separation, and it's brilliant. It's so good. It's been a while since I picked it up, but I kept it. The other day I was cleaning up my books that are behind my bed because I had stacks that I've been started and
insulating the wall.
I left that one there because, yeah, pretty much. But I left that one there because I thought it's so good. If you read it, tell me if it's true that you love it. But I have found it to be profound. I mean, I have notes everywhere, and there's references in there. He's very scientific in his approach, although very spiritual at the same time. And so he brings in the literature and the science, and it's really well done.
That's cool.
Yeah. I feel like I don't know how, I would love to know how what we're talking about ties into, other than what we talked about last time was, me saying, talking about the Constitution and talking about how, sovereignty and people who, what did you say? Rebels, what did you say last time? Rebels stand up. It's a higher authority.
Oh
They
yeah,
invoke a higher
they
authority.
believe they invoke a higher authority. Yeah.
So this feels like the higher authority. Like, what authority are we going to answer to? Are we going to answer to somebody that, I don't know about you, George. I'm going to say this as if it's like the way it is, and I realize it may not be the way it is for you. And I think that's part of the gift of this conversation, is to see, like, to be able to have this conversation, right?
For sure.
That a higher authority right now, to me, the government that is instilling these, it's probably always been true to some degree that our government was not looking out for our best interest as much as we thought they were, and our government entities, and I just didn't realize it. But now more than ever, it appears to me very clear that entity as my authority, like, I don't want to consent anymore to the agreements that I have in place with that authority, if there are any that I actually agreed to. I want to revoke those. And
Yeah.
I'm sovereign. This is the things that I'm being told I have to do, or else, and it's not necessarily me, but even watching humanity in other places. Like, I just saw a post, I'm in a Costa Rican thread. I was surprised because I'm in some groups with some Australians as well. But in a Costa Rican thread, this woman is talking about Australia and saying that she's no longer allowed to go into her own country unless she's vaccinated. She has lost her job. She's lost her house. She's going to have to, from Costa Rica, which she was visiting for 3 months, she now has to try to get her belongings sold, and she can't go back into the country without either lying about being vaccinated or actually going and getting vaccinated, which she's not feeling comfortable doing right now because of whatever she's seen or heard or whatever. So anyway, the segregation that looks like it's coming down the pike, and I think there's two things. Either there's going to be two different worlds, two different realities, like we said last time, or we unify under a different authority, maybe. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
That's fascinating, actually. Like the idea of, so let's take a breath for that, because I feel
Yeah.
There's a lot of, we were talking about this last night with a client, that when there's gravity in a situation, when something that it feels important to recognize the weight of it, like that literally we feel that weight in our bodies. So it feels important to just be like, okay, I feel that.
Yeah.
Because the idea of two worlds, those who consent to some not altogether healthy global social contract, and those who reject the authority under which that contract is made, feels like a very dangerous world to live in.
It does.
Because that's the kind of world where, like in the old days of early Christendom, when when Christendom was new, it was the Roman Empire and the Christians, and they had to identify each other secretly by drawing the half a fish and the other one do the other half a fish. That's how they would recognize each other as Christians, and they would do business with each other, but they had to do it secretly, because if the Romans found out, they'd throw them in jail.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. The symbol of the
cool.
of the born again
fish.
just the fish. And what they would do is they would draw on the ground the half a fish. And if you weren't a Christian, you didn't know what that was all about. But if you were, you knew to draw the other half of the fish and complete the picture, and then they would recognize each other. And that has always been the
Wow.
case. The Irizumi, the Japanese tribes would tattoo their hands, or they would be forced to tattoo their hands so they would recognize, or they would be one or the other, I can't remember, they would recognize each other when they went to shake their hands by the tattoos. They would know who they were. And I think that's the way that was. And then well, everywhere tribes learn to identify each other because we humans tend to create these social contracts that make it unsafe for those who don't opt in,
Yes.
right? And so again,
Yes.
we create a structure that has within it the necessary embracing of the lie of separation. In order to create this structure, we must first embrace the lie of separation.
Yes.
Because again, strip away the lie
Yeah.
of separation. In a state of being, of oneness, of wholeness, of completeness, of understanding that your well-being and mine are inextricably linked, in that state of awareness, harm is impossible.
Yeah.
So it would be impossible to create a structure that for or against. It would be impossible to create a structure that separates us. It would be impossible to create a structure that's unsafe for anybody. And so somewhere in the social contract, in this case, people have consented to another group of people saying, for our well-being, you must be vaccinated to step foot in this country.
Yes.
So
Say that again. People have consented to say that again.
So
That's
let's take Australia.
Your perspective is, yeah.
So Australia, somewhere in Australia, there's a group of people, probably Parliament, I think they call it, the Congress of Australia. They said, for the well-being of our people, you must be vaccinated to step foot on our soil.
Yeah.
Now, the rest of the population has consented to that somehow because they haven't torn down the Capitol. You know what I mean? They haven't rushed the gates and said, no, we won't live by this. I'm sure there's a small group of people who are rejecting it and ostensibly answering to a higher authority, but they're not revolting or whatever. Same here in the United States. Same with George Floyd. Same with taxes. Same with all of these things. We have consented to Congress deciding on our behalf, and there's an implication that if you're here and you're paying taxes, that you're consenting to that. You're here. I live on the protection of the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines of the United States. I live here under the blanket of protection and the freedoms that entail. And so there's a implication that I have consented to those agreements, right?
Yeah.
And that's a reasonable implication. That's a reasonable.
Well, I
assumption.
don't think it is anymore because it feels like extortion to me
Well,
now.
this is where this structure is like, okay, let's be honest, we've been comfortable in this structure.
Yeah.
Many of us have been very comfortable in this structure.
Yeah.
And it's so it's not totally honest. Like my well-being, my comfort, even my ability to interact with people I choose, my ability to share a home with enough people to afford such a nice place and all this stuff is based on almost an implied consent to the whole system that made this possible. No matter the harm.
Yes, up until now, it felt like the benefits outweighed the harm. I can tell you, George, that this year when we paid taxes, I'm gonna start. I don't want to give these fuckers one dime. This year, I was like, Daniel, I do not want my money used against me. I do
Right.
not want to give them one
Penny.
fucking dime. I've
Hey.
never in my life had so much resistance. And I'm like, we've got to, actually, I've seen videos where it says that we can talk about taxes another day
Right.
and the legality of taxes and the
Right.
people who have gone through the IRS documents that say we're not actually, it is
We're not
all
required.
consent. It's manufactured implied consent.
I've heard that too.
And
I've read
something
that too,
gets spoken. Yeah.
where by filing your taxes, you're consenting to them, and that there's some, I think they call it legal tax avoidance or something. There's a whole strategy to it.
Yeah. But the problem is people are interacting. This is the thing. We're enmeshed or entangled in the system so much that I think when people fight it, because Carrie, my massage therapist, who I love, who when y'all do come visit, you're going to go to probably.
Okay.
I've told her so much about you guys, and she said her grandparents knew that it was illegal to pay taxes, and so they didn't for like 8 years, and then they got taken to court and they lost. But the only reason they lose in court, my understanding, is because they don't have a clear picture of all the levels of agreement that have been put in place by the powers that be that we've apparently consented to that we don't know about. So when you go to court and you represent yourself as your, your, what's it called? Like your entity, your created entity at birth, where you're a corporation. If you're interacting with the corporation of the United States of America as the corporation of Allison Watts in all capital letters, you are in agreement with them. You have that corporation is owned by the United States of America. So there are, there are agreements there. But if you're going to that whole common law thing, I don't know about any of that, but I just think that people that lose those cases, they don't know all the layers. Otherwise we would all, we'd all be able to do it.
Yeah.
But we just don't understand what our actual bottom line rights are. And I think I told you Costa Rica's constitution has changed, right? And like I have an updated version that was edited in 2020.
Wow.
Which I find kind of creepy.
I'd be really, so two things. One, about the whole sovereign being and the capital letters thing. I'm really curious about that. I've heard that a handful of times. And I am really, just as a person curious about our own constitution, I'm curious about the integrity of that argument. I'm really like the capital letters thing seems like such a random human construct, and why that would be an important distinction. I'm really curious about that. Like what are the roots of that, if that's true? I am curious about that. So, and I can't, I don't know anything about it, so I can't share an opinion about it. The piece about the Constitution of Costa Rica, I'd be curious to compare the two and see what did the legislature of Costa Rica see appropriate to change and why. And that should be find outable, through what's called legislative history. When a piece of law is changed, there's a legislative history. There's the committee or the legislator who proposed the amendment, and then the committee that sussed it out and had hearings, and then the votes. Was it put to, like in the United States, in order to change the Constitution, it has to be ratified by the states of the state legislatures, or by vote of the citizens. So it has to go in all 50 states, and we have to vote for it, and a certain number of people have to have agreed to pass it in order to amend the Constitution, which is why the ERA was never amended. They never had the numbers to pass it, and why there are only 27 amendments, because it takes a lot to change the Constitution.
Yeah, it's that fascinates me. Um, Seems like right now, I'm sure there's a process, but it feels like right now the process is being ignored. And I know that mandates aren't laws, but like these executive orders, and like when I go to an airport and they say wearing a mask and the airport is a law, I'm like, really? Like, how can that be? I just, was that signed in by Biden? Like, apparently he signed like 100 executive orders in the first 2 months or something. And I don't really, it feels like all of that is being ignored right now, and that things are being either actually brought into, I don't even know if it's called a law, because I don't actually know what are laws that have been implemented and what are just, it feels like a bunch of spells. Like it
Yeah,
really,
it kind
it
of is.
feels like it is, right? It feels like these words are spoken and or not even spoken, but written. And then they're spread like this
Yeah, it's
rumor through the world. And now people believe it. And so it becomes so.
that's actually such a brilliant analogy. It kind of is a spell because
That's what
again,
it feels like.
it comes to the consent, right? Like
Yes.
it's actually, spell is such a great word because if you relate it to hypnosis, if someone can be susceptible to a hypnotic spell because they're suggestible, they have created a condition in their nervous system susceptible to being suggested into this state, and a good hypnotist finds the way you are susceptible and leads you there. It's all by suggestion, and you grant him or her or they
Mm.
permission in little bitty steps. That's how one is hypnotized, right? And
Oh my
so,
God. That is
so
exactly what's happening.
it kind of is because we've consented in little bitty steps.
Yes. Yes.
And interesting because if you remember do you remember the musical, the Broadway show, The King and I?
I know the show, but I don't think I ever saw it.
Well, there's a great line where I remember watching the movie as a child, and where Yul Brynner, who plays the king of then Siam, of course, um, and says, "So let it be said, then let it be written. Let it be written, and let it be
Let it
done."
be done.
And that
Yes.
was his proclamation of law because he was king, he was sovereign over the land. So what his word was law. So let it be said, so let it be written, so let it be written, so let it be done. And that's basically what we've in the collective consciousness agreed to by allowing for this thing called an executive order. We've said, King of Siam, proclaim all masks shall be worn in.
What shall be so? Yeah. What?
Yeah.
So how, George, do we un? I mean, I think consciousness is the answer, but then in the 3D world, right? Um,
So
this
that's a
is why
great,
we're talking. This is why we're talking. This feels so. Thank you for this. I'm
thank you for
like
the great
that.
question.
Yeah, that we have given consent little by little. The thing is, how can it be true consent when there's not consciousness? When how can it be that when you're under a spell and you give consent, not realizing you're under a spell, that you are held to that consent? How
It's
do we
like,
get
yeah,
out from under the spell?
it's the layers of the analogy are so rich. It's like if you've drugged someone and then under the effects of those
Yes.
drugs, you say, hey, is it okay if we have sex? And they
Yes.
say, yes, they gave you consent, but is that really consent? Of course not.
Yes.
And so here's the question. Um, yeah, you asked the right question. How do we transform these structures back, if they ever were, into ones that create the conditions for well-being, to create the conditions of hospitable to life.
Yes.
And again, back if they ever were, and if they weren't, how do we create them? So now this is where the bottom, I don't know. It could, there are many people who say aliens will come down and they have the plans and they'll give us the plans and we'll be able to live in peace. That's one perfectly acceptable, theory as far as
Totally possible.
and the seriously, like
Totally. I totally agree. I promise I'm not joking. I know that is I
the
think they
universe
could
is
be totally watching us and saying we can't interfere until
right.
they absolutely fuck this up so bad that they can't get themselves out of it. And then we get to come down, whether it be angels or aliens or, whatever.
And if that's true, it's like, guys,
we're close.
what are you waiting
hey,
for?
Yeah, exactly.
Anytime.
How bad does it have to get? Yes, exactly.
What? Or are you just fucking with us? Like, is this entertainment?
Right. I heard somebody say this is an experiment. This version of Earth is an experiment in how much separation can be handled. Like how much separation from God can exist. That we're the ones that are here experimenting with how much separation.
I love that one. I haven't heard that one. I love it. It makes sense. I've also heard that this is an experiment in how much sovereignty can we each be trusted with.
Which is kind of the same thing.
Very similar.
Right?
Yeah,
it was
like
kind of, it's like if we realize how separate we are, to me, I told you, I think last week, I can't, again, the time is so weird right now, that I had this realization that these people that I call the fuckers are actually the bringers of the awakening. That it feels like something's being done to us, and yet it's creating, we are in part playing our role in the biggest awakening that we know of, that's ever happened in human history. And does this darkness have to happen to bring the light? I don't think so. I think we can.
Well, that's where
I think our consciousness, humanity. Yeah, that's where our consciousness is right now, has been. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, there was a piece about like what has to happen. How do we build this? And there's a piece that I got in meditation maybe 5 years ago. I remember it was in the springtime. We were at the lake and I was meditating, and it was the same meditation that I got 10,000 liters of light. And it was that same meditation that there was probably something in my consciousness that was asking how. And what I got was, and it's funny, I'll tell you how I interpreted it after I say it, but what I got was the existing structures can be repurposed.
Right.
I heard you say that. And the crazy thing is my tiny little human vision, when I came out of that and sat in contemplation, I thought, oh, that means we can keep our Infusionsoft account and keep using Infusionsoft to email our clients. Like, that's the tiny little context. Right. I interpreted this fucking galactic message. The existing structures can be repurposed. And I thought, oh, we can keep our Infusionsoft account. like such a perfect juxtaposition.
That's so awesome. I love it.
And what I'm seeing now is that maybe the existing structure is democracy. Maybe the existing structure is the Constitution. Maybe the existing structure is the United Nations. Who knows? But that we can repurpose it simply by, maybe not simply, but by saying, okay, if the original purpose of this was actually to look out for the well-being of all people, and if even though the writers of this beautiful document were slave owners and didn't have it perfectly, even if they were part of a secret society, even if all of these things are true, this structure that they've created might be repurposed for the good of all life. might be repurposed for the well-being of everyone, might be repurposed to elevate the consciousness of everyone, to eliminate and release the lie of separation.
am having a huge awareness right now. So what if, let me see if I can put this into words. So the structure that can be, okay.
Oh my, hold on one second.
What if all, okay.
Let me just check something.
Do I need to
Oh no,
turn
God,
off
I
my
want you
video?
to keep going. No, I just
Okay.
have to check my calendar. Oh, thank God. I have an 11 o'clock. I thought I had a 10 o'clock.
Okay. Okay.
Go ahead. Sorry.
What if,
Mhm.
I think this feels true to me. So I'm going to say it. For how long has humanity been in its current structure of some kind of rulership, government, whatever?
Couple thousand years, 3,000 years.
Okay. What if since the beginning of that structure, the consciousness of separation and elitism has to be in place in order for that system to even exist, at least in the way that it does? Like that system, there's an agreement. I don't know if you ever read that propaganda thing that I sent you, the book, but there is, like, in chapter 1, propaganda was the book written by Freud's nephew, and it
Yeah.
was the guy who manipulated the media. And basically it says exactly what you're saying, which is what I've become aware of, is that we have apparently given consent to the powers that be to control who gets into government and what we see and don't see, and what we buy and don't buy, and because they know better than we do.
Right.
So there's this inherent, just by the agreement, at least until, I don't know, the beginning of let's just call it when the United States came here. And then allegedly, so in 1776, these guys, maybe, you probably know your history way better than I do, actually came here to be free. And then allegedly in like 1800 something, they realized they couldn't do it. So they went back, and that's when they got corporatized as the United States of America, like 1871 or 1821 or something. And so they became a corporation of England.
I'm not aware of that.
And so I wonder, yeah, there's, I'm going to go to this website. I'm going to put it in the chat. Okay.
Okay.
And just watch his, hold on, wrong thing. Let me find it. Watch these 4 videos that are the foundational, I think they're called the foundational, it's called a warrior calls, but I don't know if your Google will take you. If you go on Google, I use DuckDuckGo, so I can actually not be censored to where I can go. And what, like, I noticed one time I went to a website on Google to the wrong web, it was a site, to it on DuckDuckGo, I actually was able to get to the person's real website. And so I stopped using Google.
Oh, that's
a warrior
great.
calls. Go to it's called Foundational Knowledge. They're really short. And I think he's in Canada, so it'll be the Canadian version, but the US has its own version. Costa Rica has its own version. It has to do with the central banking and how it's all set up with the Vatican and London Bank and all that stuff. But he's not going to get into all that really in detail. It's short.
Have you
history
seen Zeitgeist?
of
You've seen that.
corporate. Yes. And I could see it again, and it would be a totally different.
Probably
sure. all I saw when I watched it was just like a healthy dose of skepticism. It's probably
right.
But what I'm saying is, if the foundational agreement to be governed in that agreement is basically saying, I trust you to make decisions on my behalf because I am
smarter,
I'm not, I don't know, or whatever we've given up. In propaganda, it's spelled out pretty clearly that basically we don't want to be bothered by it. and we don't really know who the best candidates are. And so we're entrusting these people to,
Yeah.
give us 2 candidates to simplify everything.
Make it
'Cause if we had
easy.
more, it would be too complicated.
Because I just
For
want to be
us
able to go to the
dumb-
store and get my toilet paper. I don't want to have to grow my own vegetables.
Exactly.
I don't want to kill
So
my own meat.
inside of this construct, we've agreed that we, what did I write down? It just felt so profound. The whole thing is based in separation, and the whole thing is based in a hierarchical relinquishing of our sovereignty,
Right.
just by being inside of this, which that's not true if in the Bill of Rights it says, the highest authority is God. But
Well,
somehow
the Bill
it's
of
been
Rights doesn't
twisted.
say that.
Where
The Declaration of Independence says
the
that.
Declaration, see, I get those all confused.
Yeah.
The Declaration of Independence.
But
So,
the Declaration of Independence isn't a legislative document.
right.
It's a letter to King George. It's a letter to King George,
Okay.
and it's basically, and it lists
That was
9
originally what
pages.
yes, that was originally what we were founded on. But I think it's gotten fucked up
Well,
when we corporatize.
it's what's ironic maybe about it is the document itself. It's a letter to King George that says, we're listing all of these grievances. There's I don't remember exactly how many there are, but there are 50 or 60 of them about all the shitty things you've been doing to us since we came here to this country, to this land, not a country, and that we're going to do it without you from now on. We're rejecting your sovereignty over us.
Yes.
So the irony is thick there. Like, they're saying, we're going to do this without you. We're going to establish our own treaties with other countries. We're going to establish our own trade. We're going to establish our own, and of course, immediately there was even economic. We're going to keep buying shit from England because we need to buy shit from England.
Right.
But it's not a legislative document. It doesn't establish a system of government. It says that they will establish a system of government, but first we're rejecting your system of government.
Yes.
And in the Constitution, the beginning of the Constitution, the preamble of the Constitution does say, in order to establish a system of government and for the common good, to defend the citizens, et cetera, et cetera. Anyhow, it's what's interesting is what you were sharing shook something loose for me, is this idea of, and I just want to be aware of the time because I probably,
yeah, whenever you need to go, I'm
maybe
good.
10 more minutes.
Okay,
This
perfect.
is so good, right?
It's so good.
Well, you made me aware there's this one piece about the about giving that consent over time, and even the propaganda that convinces us to give that consent. Because if you look at the development of humanity, like, I have been convinced that going to a marketplace where I might know the person ringing me out, I might not, but I literally can go to the grocery store, buy everything I need, and never say a word to a human being. I never have to interact with someone. I never have to recognize the humanity of another person. I can stand there stone-faced and pretend that person doesn't exist. I don't have to be neighborly. I don't have to be kind. I don't have to be compassionate. I don't have to feel anything to meet all of my needs in the modern society. Now, go back 1,000 years, go back 5,000 years. In order to eat, I must engage my brother on a hunting expedition. I must know my brother's problems. I must comfort him when he's uncomfortable. I must nourish him and nurture him when he's ill. I must carry him when he can't, and he does the same for me. That relationship must exist in order for us to exist. We must coexist in order to exist, so that we can hunt together, we can grow our food together, we must interact. If there's a problem between us because I have paired up with with a woman and he looks funny at my woman and I get offended by that, we need to work that out. We need to bring that into community council and say, this upsets me. And well, she's hot and I find her attractive. Well, that's not the rules. That's not the rules we've agreed to. Oh, okay. And we work it out as a community. We must do that in order to survive. But in the
Yes.
modern world, I don't have to feel a thing. I don't have to interact with a thing. I don't have to care about anybody. And this is where, because somewhere along the line, we've bought into the lie of separation. If I do not believe in separation, I can't even go to the grocery store without feeling connected to the person ringing me out. If I don't believe in separation and I have embraced oneness, I have to be kind to that person. I have to care about that person. I have to say, may I ask you a question? Yes, I'm trying to find the toothpaste. Oh, it's over there. Thank you. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I have to be compassionate to that person if I know, like I know that that person's well-being is inextricably linked to my own.
So this is perfect, because this is what I'm saying is that I think that maybe they're not exactly the same. This agreement, maybe in the next conversation we can talk about assumptions or premises. Like I think that might be something to talk about, but because I love how attorneys do that. I remember seeing a debate one day and the guy would say something and the other guy would say, well, I can't respond to you about that until we clear up the premise, which is not true.
Right.
You're asking me the question based on a premise.
Based on a premise that I refuse to accept, or
we got to talk about the premise first, because, and so I think for some reason that's coming up, maybe to talk about premises and agreements. I think that this disconnection from others and ourselves has been manufactured over time by religion.
Yes.
On purpose. In order to maintain our dependence, lack of sovereignty, control. Yes. In order to maintain the structure of being ruled, the spell.
Because if
disconnection. Yes.
Because if you all are connected to one another and you all know that you're connected to one another, then you all know that the real power lies within you, then my spell won't work on you.
Right.
Then my proclamation of power is irrelevant, becomes useless. And that's not an option.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well said. So let's look at that. That's exciting. That feels like a really exciting layer to look at, like assumptions and premises and
agreement. I think that the agreements are, I just think there's like a foundational agreement that had to be agreed to somewhere along the line, which probably is separation. And then the second one underneath that is, because that's a human thing, separation, that they now are playing on and making us vulnerable and making us dependent and, making us comfortable. So we're not fulfilling our purposes, like numbing us out, distracting us, keeping us in the matrix so that we're not our greatest, most magnificent selves.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's inside the premises and agreement somewhere. There's been those lies are being perpetuated on purpose and believed because, we think we're human and we think that we're in danger, and danger is being manufactured to then create more running around,
lock us in,
worrying about things. Yeah. To lock us into our smallness.
So we start chipping away. We start chipping away at that from the inside.
Yeah.
I love that. Cool. From our smallness to our greatness, to the truth. Yeah. Infinite beings, enjoying life as these puny human beings for the time being. Yes. And actually, like this bears so little resemblance to the truth. This,
Yeah.
it's awesome and amazing, and it feels so good, and it's juicy, and it's painful, and it's fun, and it's, but it's this much of the truth.
Yes. 100%. Yeah. So if the structures are holding that in place, like let's blow that out of the water.
Here's the thing, and then I gotta go. My
Okay,
guess
I got it. Yeah.
my guess is, and I could be wrong, but my guess is that these structures are actually so good that if we adjust the force behind them by just a little bit, they could, like, people are talking about, oh, burn it down. I don't know that we have to burn it down. I think we just
the
have
force
to
or the
it.
intention behind it. The true, if all we switched was the consciousness.
Yes.
If all there was the intention for people to be their most magnificent selves, instead of people to be enslaved to us, the almighty, all-powerful leaders,
and
it
people
would be
to
a
know
completely different game.
Yes. A completely different game. So let's talk about the assumptions. I love that. Excuse me. Let's talk about the assumptions and premises. I love that next time.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you.
So good.
I'm glad you recorded it, because I definitely want please send me the recording.
I will.
I that was powerful for me. I appreciate it.
Me too. That was so good. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, I think next Friday. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, good.
Give Tracy a hug and a kiss for me.
I absolutely, Daniel too.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye.